What's up, summoners? Ingler here. Normally for the Epic 7 Worth It, we talk about all the heroes that are currently on banner, both the Covenant banner as well as the Mystics, or any new heroes that may come out, and go in depth in their kits. Well, this time we're going to be doing something a little bit different because of Angel of Light Angelica, where we have a situation, we have an incredibly powerful 4-star, potentially game-breaking unit that you're not guaranteed to get or even pity, which does bring up a lot of different questions, such as what should I do if I'm really close to pity? What should I do with the current banner rotation? And what are my thoughts on things like Specimen Says that I feel like I should spend more time discussing so you have more information and have more recommendations for you to make that ultimate decision. So if you like the video, make sure you like, subscribe, and Discord server, link down in the description. Without further ado, let's get right into it. I honestly almost didn't make this video because I've been incredibly busy, which is why I haven't been able to stream. But a lot of people in the Discord have told me about their Angel of Light Angelica and how game-breaking she has been for them. They've climbed so many ranks in RTA in less than a day because of this unit. This unit could potentially be the next perma-banned unit. That's how powerful she looks out to be, which is just like we predicted in previous streams. So, Angel of Light Angelica, definitely a very powerful unit, and how this video will roll out is first we'll do a summary on all the units. Then we'll talk about the situations that you need to consider for the Mystic banner as far as pity, as far as Specimen Says, and then we'll actually go into deep kit analysis of both Angel of Light Angelica and Specimen Says, because that's going to be the most important banner. So with that, let's get to the summary. So first for Lilias and Vivian, I will touch on them very briefly in case you were wondering about them. They're both very PvE focused heroes, and we just came out of multiple limited banners. So my suggestion is take this time to save up your bookmarks, right? We just got so many 5-stars that you could be working on. We just got so many different units that you could be putting resources on right now and saving your bookmarks for those limiteds in the future. Now, if you really do like the units, they are quite good. Like, they're not bad. They're actually pretty good. Lilias being really good for PvE because of her dual attack chance with S1, as well as having some really good synergy for PvP with things like Senya with high attack, or even Gunther that you can use for some night cleaving if that's something you've wanted to do. But overall, not the stupid strong PvP that she used to have, but still pretty decent at PvP and really solid PvE. As far as Vivian, she has an incredible PvE. Really amazing at what she does. For a lot of hunts, she's actually very strong, especially Banshee, since she can clear the first wave and give attack buff. And overall, not a bad unit to have. Again, she does have some capabilities for PvP, for arena, for cleaving, and even for RTA as an aggressive option, although she doesn't see that role as much anymore. But definitely not a bad unit. Again, my recommendation, because we're so low on bookmarks recently, I would save up, especially because we know episode 4 is coming, and we're very likely to get another limited hero. We also know the Luna rerun is just around the corner, and if that's something that you wanted, it should be coming sometime in October, right? As well as episode 4 is most likely going to introduce another limited hero. So again, not a bad time to start saving. We definitely need the time to actually save up for some future banners. So that's it for that. But now to the bread and butter of this video, which is going to be actually talking about the Mystic banner. So first, quick summary on the units. Specimen Says, I need to be brutally honest with you guys. I do have Specimen Says. I've had him for a very long time. I enjoy using him when I can. And I've tried several builds on him. And for the most part, he does work for fun. The problem with Specimen Says is that he's not a self-reliant hero. He needs a complete team built around him, as well as having good gear himself. If you have the really good team, he actually has a very high ceiling, and he essentially becomes a unit that can one-shot anything in this game, right? So if you have the right support for him for Arena and Guild Wars, you can have some really strong cleave time team compositions that are very good at taking down tanky style teams, right? So he definitely has that potential. But in RTA, it is very difficult to actually get a draft that is able to utilize him properly, where they don't already have a bunch of Soul Weavers that can stop you from actually doing his game plan. So not only is he a unit that requires a lot of units built around him, he's also a very high skill ceiling unit where you need to actually have really good drafting knowledge and really be able to use them properly to get the most out of him. And even then, when you're able to do all that, it's almost not worth it, right? It's almost something that it's just you're adding a lot of extra work to just have fun with that unit, right? So it's for fun, yes, incredible. For being OP, not necessarily like a high use type unit. It's something that you can definitely use it as a pocket pick, and it's definitely a fun unit to pull out, which at the end of the day is what Epic 7 is all about. But again, not a game breaking unit. If he was on his own banner, I would probably have told you to skip for him, right? Unless you really wanted to play with him and you have the right support for him. Now, on the other hand, Angel of Light Angelica kind of does everything. Her kit is pretty overloaded, and we will dive deeper into it, but just know she's incredible for every team, right? For bruisers, for control, for anti-cleaving, right? She does a lot. Her kit is stacked, right? There's almost no team that she doesn't fit into, and there are very few counters. And when I say that, I mean that very literally. There's like less than 5 actual counters, and none are really hard counters, besides just having an incredibly high Aphris unit. But because she does so much, she can play around her counters and still potentially get you wins, right? So very, very powerful unit, and we will definitely dive more in depth into her kit because she's that strong. So now, as far as my recommendations for each of the units, and as far as like the summoning, right? So if you are someone that is right at pity, right? Like myself, I tried 60 pulls on her and I did not get her. I want you guys to realize you are not guaranteed Angel of Light Angelica. No matter how much money you throw at this unit and at this banner, you only have less than a 1% chance to get her. That means you can throw 100 summons and you're not likely to actually get her statistically, right? And that sucks, right? That really sucks. No matter how much money you throw, there is a chance you will not pull her. Even if you use 200 summons, there is a chance you will not pull for her. If you're someone that is right at pity, if you don't want Spess and you don't have a team for Spess and you're free to play, my recommendation is to not pull for her. And I know that's really hard because she's that broken, and I'm really having issues with that as well because I really want her. She is that good. But the fact is, you're not guaranteed to get her, and you are losing your pity from a future unit. Now, if you're in this situation and you want Spess, then that's fine. I would just say summon on this banner. Why? You can get Spess, who if you can enjoy if you wanted him, and you have a chance of getting Angel Light Angelica, and if you use your pity, I would keep pulling for her. The other thing is if you are a spending player. If you're someone that spends, this would be the type of situation where you will most likely spend. Why? Because if you're spending, you are trying to get this unit. But again, you're not guaranteed to get it. So that's a little bit more gambling. It's a little bit more risky because there's a chance you could drop like $500, $600, $900 and not get her. So it's almost like something to consider. I am a spender and I'm still saving my pity, right? Because I'd rather wait for the next ML 5-star hero. Now, that is my recommendation. If you're close to pity, free to play, most likely skip, although it's really going to hurt. Just because you're losing your pity and you're not guaranteed to get her. That's just a double negative. You could end up being very upset. Now, if you're someone that gambles, again, don't take my suggestion, right? If you really think you can get her and you think it's destiny that you're going to get her, then by all means, you're welcome to keep pulling if you really, really want her. She is that powerful that is definitely a consideration as well. Again, just a suggestion. I would suggest if you're here, not pull unless you're ready to potentially be very disappointed, right? As far as if you're very far from pity, you should pull on the banner either next week or the week after. Why? This current rotation is a little bit weak, right? The 5-star artifact and hero is not that great, and the only 4-star you're really looking at is Hades, with Strake's Gauntlet being an okay option, right? So not a great banner. Whereas next week you have Bazaar, who's a really solid hero. Time Matter is not that great, but you also do have things like Lots that can be Ox, Lots imprints. You also have things such as Leo, who are really good free-to-play units. You also have things like Adamant Shield, who's an artifact you can never have enough of, as well as Tome, who's really good for things like for a lot of different Soul Weavers. It's actually not a bad artifact, as well as Christy, who's actually a very viable 3-star hero, right? So you do have a lot more options if you do end up pulling next week, as well as seeing what's coming in the future and future ML heroes if you're at that point that you are at like right at pity. So again, to summarize this section into a more cohesive, if you're right at pity, my suggestion is, if you're not a spender, to just save your pity unless you're okay with getting Spess, right? If you're okay with getting Spess, even though I told you he's very hard to use and requires a full team around him, then by all means, keep pulling because you have a chance of getting one of the most broken heroes in the game, right? If you're not a spender, if you're a free-to-play hero player, it is extremely risky. Only do it if you're very confident in it, and even then you lose pity, which sucks, right? So, and then if you're closer to pity, you can also, it's a little bit more gambly because there's a chance you again will lose your pity. But I ended up doing 60 summons for her until I got to this point, right? And I'm saving my pity, right? Sadly, as much as I want her, I know I'm not guaranteed to get her. If you're someone that's really far, just pull on this banner. If you're someone that's very far from pity, I would say even over 100 from pity, you want to pull on this banner. You want to pull on this banner. The chance of getting this unit is just incredible. She's just an incredibly strong unit, right? Most likely going to be perma-banned from RTA. You're very rarely going to get to use her in RTA because everyone's going to be pre-banning her, right? But if you have her, you don't have to pre-ban her, and you can definitely use her in Arena and Guild Wars. But with that, let's actually look at her kit more in depth. why is this Angel of Light Angelica such a strong hero? Why am I doing all this hype up? You might be thinking, okay, King Blair, this unit can't be that good, right? You shouldn't, there shouldn't be any reason why you really have to focus so much on the units. And trust me, this unit is pretty freaking loaded, right? So let's actually take a look at her. Man, I am so sad I was not able to pull for her, even though I used 65 summons on her, so that sucks. But alright, now Angel of Light Angelica. First, as always, let's look at the stats. One thing I want to point out is that she is a mage, which arguably has access to the best artifacts in the game. Just pointing that out there because it's kind of true that mages are very stacked on artifacts. Now, she is a 4-star, so she does have lower than average stats, but it's not the worst in the world, right? She doesn't have any attack, which she doesn't need. Her HP, it's not great, but it's not the worst in the game. It's not that great. His speed 112 is pretty solid. She does lose to things like Fairy Tail Tenebra. She loses to a lot of different openers, such as Top Model Luluka, right? So most openers do actually outspeed her. Most speed contesters do actually outspeed her as far as base speed. And a lot of mages actually do end up speeding her. But again, as we'll talk about, why she has so little counters is because of how good her kit is. Then as far as effectiveness, she does have some effectiveness, which is nice, and some efforts that's honestly kind of wasted unless you're going with some really quirky build, which is, again, something that I was probably going to do if I ever get her, but it is there in case you do want it. So pretty not terrible stat line, right? And as far as imprints, she does get effectiveness, which she is going to be needing, and it does make her a lot better because you essentially start with 42 effectiveness. With a ring, you're around 100% effectiveness, right? Which again is really, really nice because you'll want this S3 to land that we're going to be talking about in a second. So now let's actually look at her kit. Also, by the way, her design is really amazing. I actually really like the design. I think they did a really good job capturing both Angelica's essences as well as with the quotes. If you have the chance to go back and listen to the quotes, they're actually pretty great. But now let's actually roll straight into it. So first we have the S1. This S1 is actually not a bad S1, right? So what does it do? The S1 is going to silence for 1 turn with a 75% chance, so a really good chance to silence, and silence stops you from doing anything except your S1. And when you are silenced after attacking, CR push back by 25% chance. So that's a really good S1. Why is that a really good S1? Well, not only are you silencing an opponent's unit, meaning they essentially lose a turn and they're only able to really do a quick S1, the other thing is that you are also going to be pushing them back by 25% chance. So you're controlling the pace of the game a lot. And that's just the S1, right? Very, very good S1. On its own, incredible S1. Honestly, it's one of the better S1s in the game. And of course, if you soul burn it with 10 souls, the chance goes up to 100%, which again, can come in clutch when you're fighting against an opponent. Again, it doesn't ignore FRS. So if you have a high FRS unit, you can definitely tank that potentially resist it. And 15% also exists. But again, really, really good, right? Taking that unit out, only forcing them to do S1 and pushing them back, all in an S1 on a unit that's going to be moving pretty fast, right? So not a bad S1, right? And that's just S1. Now the S2, which again, on its own right, could easily have gone into any other character in this game and made them good. It's a very good S2. So what it does is first, immune to stun. Why does this matter? It makes it so Emil is not a counter. Emil, usually the way that you would beat these type of units is by outspeeding them, such as a Sid. But because she has access to immune to stun, Emil doesn't really counter. The other thing is Cerise. If you're someone that doesn't want immunity, Cerise can't stun you, right? So again, Cerise can't stun you, which means that you don't really need immunity that much unless you're trying to stop something else. So yeah, like if you're trying to stop an AC at silence, you still should put immunity on her. But again, she is immune to stun, so Cerise can't really stun her. Spectre Tenebria can't really stun her, so she's guaranteed to hit her turns. The other thing is that she has a built-in CR push mechanic. Why? I don't know. But it is going to give her 8% chance every attack an ally is attacked, except for the caster. This means that if you're hit by an AoE attack, you are getting 24% CR push. If they're hitting any other unit except for you, you are getting an 8% CR push, right? So that is really good cycling, because if they do an AoE attack, you're a quarter of the bar there for another turn. And we talked about this S1 that can push back and silence. That can get very annoying in a unit that is cycling you, right? And that is built to go fast. So again, really, really good cycling. Then the other part is going to be the reason why she's a really good anti-cleave unit. When you're hit by an attack that is AoE, you have a 100% chance when it's fully logoed out to activate Guardian Angel. And this skill is a non-attack skill. There are 2 things why that's important. Thing 1, Polides S2 will trigger on this skill. Right? That's just something to point out. Polides S2 will trigger on this skill. And the other thing is going to be that Spirit's Breath, which is an artifact that reduces cooldowns, will trigger on this skill. And Spirit's Breath, we'll talk about a lot more when we get to S3. But that's important to note because that is really big. And again, when you do that, you cleanse one debuff, right? Really good. Think of Bazaar, right? If a Bazaar S3s you, you're only getting pushed back by 6% because you're getting CR push because he's hitting everyone. You're cleansing the Unable to be buffed, and you're getting your team skill nullifier. If you're going against a Cleave team, if you're going against a Pavel, if Pavel S2s you, you get skill nullifier up right away, and she's getting more turns and getting closer to her S3. So again, stops you from getting one shot by things like Pavel. So again, this skill is incredible for anti-cleaving. It is also just an amazing support unit because it's every 3 turns. And I'm not sure if Spirit Breath actually will work on this skill. I think it does, but don't quote me on that. It probably doesn't because that'd be really broken, but I think it might actually work on this. So that's something that I would still need to test. Don't quote me on that. But again, every 3 turns, not bad, right? Every 2 turns, you're cleansing one debuff and you're giving skill nullifier. If you're pairing her off with things like Stene, they have to AoE to reach Stene, but if they AoE, they're also giving you skill nullifier and they're cleansing. So think Arbiter Villager. If an Arbiter Villager does an S3, you're cleansing that blind and you're giving yourself skill nullifier. So if the RB comes back, you'll have skill nullifier for that time, right? So just some things to consider. Very powerful S2. This alone already makes her a good unit. Just these 2 skills, she's already good enough to be a really good anti-cleave counter and a decent control option just with the S1. But then we get to the S3, which is the strongest control skill in this game. Plain and simple. There is no control skill that's stronger than this. Why is the skill so good? So first, dispels 2 buffs. Why is that important? Unlike F10A, you cannot get cheesed, right? There's something with FCC where you can have a Fallen Cecilia and you can always keep immunity, which kind of keeps F10A in check to an extent. Well, this doesn't really matter. 2 buffs is a lot. That means as long as you're taking turn 1, you're guaranteed to essentially strip the opponent. That is very harmful, right? The other part of this skill is that it applies Unable to be buffed after you strip for 2 turns, right? That's really big because, again, they cannot set up into you, right? If they have a General Purges, they're not getting attack buff. If they have a FCC, they're not getting a skill nullifier or barrier. If they have any buff unit that doesn't cleanse, kind of loses to this. And in case you're wondering, well, you still have things like Maid. This skill also silences for 1 turn, right? So, again, dispel 2 buffs, apply Unable to be buffed, and silence. The opponent essentially is forced to just use S1 their first turn. And why do I say this is the best control skill? Because right now you might be thinking, okay, outside of FCC, isn't this just like Fairy Tail Tenebria? No, because this skill is not an attack skill. So when we actually look at the animation, it looks like she's attacking them, but this skill does not hit them. This skill does not hit. Why is this a big deal? Why does this make this skill significantly better? A, you can't evade it. Things like Violet, things like Rylet, they can't evade it. Rylet gets screwed up by this skill, right? Rylet loses evasion, Rylet loses immunity. So, A, you can't evade it. It's going to hit you, right? No matter what artifact you had. Even the new Guild Wars artifact that was really good for anti-controlling doesn't hit. A Tywin, doesn't matter if you have an A Tywin because it's not hitting you. You're not getting the instant dispel that you normally would with A Tywin. The other thing is like with Champion Serato, right? If you have a Champion Serato, he is getting silence and cannot be buffed for that turn, assuming they don't hit him, right? Because it does not hit them. The fact that this skill does not actually hit the opponent makes it significantly better for a control skill. So now you start seeing the whole kit together and you start to realize why this unit is so strong. So first, you essentially are locking out your opponent from doing AoEs. Because if they do an AoE skill, they're giving you AoE skill nullifier, they're allowing you to cleanse, and they're allowing Angel of Light Angelica to cycle. The other thing is if you're going against Cleave, you're getting 24% CR push, which means you're going to be cutting the opponent if you ever build fast, assuming they don't one-shot her, which you should build her so she doesn't get one-shot. Then, once you get the cut in, you're able to strip your opponent's buffs, you're able to apply Unable to be buffed, and silence for 1 turn, making it incredibly difficult for your opponent to respond after turn 1. So it gives you turn 1 priority, as well as a very nasty debuff for turn 2. And then on top of all that, on the turns that this skill is on cooldown, you have access to an S1 that is silencing 1 target. Let's say they made Chloe. If they haven't made Chloe, as long as you have a soul burn and they don't 15% you, you can silence that make Chloe every single turn so they can't cleanse unless they have 20 souls to burn, which they're not going to have that many souls if all they can do is S1s because they're silenced, right? So again, a lot of control going on with this S1 as well as the S3. And the best part of it all is that she's a mage. She has access to Spirit's Breath, which when she uses a non-attack skill, her skill cooldown is decreased. So when she uses this S3, it actually essentially becomes a 3-turn cooldown skill, which means that every 3 turns, right, you're using this skill. And if they hit you with an AoE, you can theoretically be using this S3 every other turn, which is a lot on a unit that has self-cycling, right? So it forces the opponent to go into her, and she's gonna be decently tanky and decently fast, right? So we have a unit that is incredibly controlling, good at anti-cleaving, good at supporting your team, and good at giving you turn 1 priority. It has the makings of a top tier unit, and she definitely has shown to be incredibly powerful, right? So as far as counters and things that can actually stop her, I don't want to be all doom and gloom. Some people are saying she's gonna break the game. That could very much happen because she's that strong. I see myself permabanning her. She's that strong. I don't think I'm gonna be able to RTA without permabanning her. But in the case that you are a very brave soul and you don't want to ban her and you want some counters, if you are cleaving, Polides can do okay into her, because if you have a Polides cleave into an Angel Light Angelica, assuming your speeds are really high, you can cut this CR push so she doesn't cut you. So you're able to actually set up your cleave. And if you have a Polides, you're able to get rid of the skill nerf. So let's say you're using Pavel. If you Pavel S2, she activates the skill. Polides will trigger her skill, and then she'll be able to go back up, and we'll also take up the skill node so you can actually finish her off, right? So that's important to remember, because it's not a great thing that you have to play around so much one unit, but it is there with Polides. Outside of that, if she's just opening, Polides is not a counter to her. Because if you're using her into a Polides, or you try to pick Polides into her, again, if the Polides S2 is reacting to this S3, you're only really doing a little bit of damage, and she still gets to put up skill nullifiers and gets to cycle you, right? So again, in a raw matchup, unless you're cleaving, Polides does not actually counter her that hard. It's honestly more of a soft counter. The other part is going to be the other things that beat her are outspeeders, right? If you have a very fast Cowrick, as we mentioned, her speed, she's a 4-star, right? She still has her weaknesses in the stat line. So if you have something like a Cowrick that can reset her before she takes a turn, that is really good. If you can one-shot her with a very, very strong Acid, and I mean very, very strong, or a Kise, again, pretty good, right? So things like Kise, Cowrick, Cowrick, and potentially Acid, assuming they don't have a very tanky one, or putting him in a really tanky team, then you also do have access to try to counter her that way. So trying to outspeed her, and then of course, high ER units are always there. But because she has such high ER, you have to have over a 200 FRS unit, which again is taking up a slot. But if you do something like a Kitty, Clarissa that can get really high FRS, Emo Cowrick, very high ER, Maid Chloe, they can definitely do a good job. Particularly Maid Chloe, because if you have 20 souls, you're actually able to soul burn S1 with Maid Chloe, get an extra turn, and then cleanse off these nasty debuffs and deal that way with Angelica, right? So Maid Chloe, high ER cleanser, still do decent into her, but again, it's very, very hard and makes it really, really hard. If you're actually playing Angelica, you're actually going to want to build her fast and tanky, right? Very easy, with good effectiveness, right? I would say 150 effectiveness plus is what you're trying to shoot for, with around like at least 10k HP and at least 1.5k defense, so you're surviving some of those acids. But with that, now let's quickly go over Specimen Says, who's a unit that you're most likely going to be potentially getting if you actually don't get her. So this video is already becoming super long, so I'm going to try to go a little bit faster. But again, Specimen Says has the same stat line as someone like Violet. Very high HP, very low defense, very good attack, very good speed, really good crit rate. Right, so the only thing that he's lacking is defense, and his imprint is going to be more attack, which is pretty nice. Again, not a bad stat line, right? Pretty solid stat line. And he is going to be a thief, so he has access to Moonlight Dreamblade. The S1 is going to be a very basic stun with a 50% chance. Not the greatest chance out there, but it does have a chance to stun. And if you stun, you do get some CR push. It's not a bad skill. The only thing is that there is a lot of very high ER units, and unless you're giving your Specimen Says effectiveness, this skill doesn't really do much for you, right? So again, if you're going against high ER units, Knights, you're rarely ever going to get this S1 to actually do anything unless you give him an effectiveness build, and that's where the difficulty of building him actually comes. The S2, again, another AoE attack that also has a chance to stun. This one is a 60% chance. Again, not the most reliable thing on the planet. It is AoE though, and it does give him 50% chance to CR push. And it does do some decent damage, AoE. And again, 60% chance, not the highest in the world. but not the worst either. And then of course the S3, which is what he's known for. It's a single target damage skill that applies restriction and penetrates defense by 30%. The multipliers are not great, but this gets good when the enemy is stunned. So if I do this on a stunned enemy, you penetrate defense. Why is this good? It does dummy amounts of damage. My Specimen Says is on only 3,000 attack, 220 crit damage, and this kill will do 25k, right? If the enemy is stunned, right? That's a lot. That's a lot of damage, right? He has a single target, really high potential. I can't say that anymore because Strasse exists. But aside from Strasse, really freaking good damage, right? Assuming the target is stunned. If you do kill, the skill resets, which is nice because you're able to use it again on another stunned enemy. And if the skill is not on cooldown, which it shouldn't be a lot of the times, if an ally except for yourself is hit, you have a 20% chance to counterattack with this S1 that could potentially stun and set you up into a big S3. So as far as builds, people honestly have done counter, they have done lifesteal, and they have done speed. So counter is good because this skill only covers allies, it doesn't cover himself, which means that he does get countered, he does get targeted a lot. Lifesteal is good because we mentioned he is squishy but has really high damage potential, meaning if he's about to die and he's able to get one good S3, he's back to full health if he's on lifesteal. And of course there's the speed one because it eases the build for him. As far as to how you should build them, my recommendation is unless you're using him in an aggressive team, you want to build them with high defense, high HP, some effectiveness, and at least 3k damage and at least 220 crit damage and at least 3k attack, right? Because you want him to be able to kill, but you also want him to be able to survive and stick around on the board to be annoying and try to stun. Very hard stat line. He basically wants almost every stat, which makes him that hard to build. If you're using him in an offensive team, however, you can just build him with speed and you can just have him follow up right after a stunner like Emma Aura or a Tywin, clear off a unit, and if you give him something like RNL, that's pretty good. If you give him something like Wind Rider, that also works, right? There's a lot of different things you can actually give him, but you don't need to focus as much on the HP aspect of him. So yeah, that is going to be it for Specimen Says. So that is going to be all that I have for you guys today. I know it's a lot of information. Hopefully this made a lot more sense. If you do have any more questions, please leave that in the comments and let me know if you're able to pull for him. But that is all I got for you guys today, and I will see you next time. Peace.